When you start focusing on yourself, everything begins to change. The first thing that shifts is your awareness. You become conscious of where your time goes, who you're around, and what habits are shaping your identity. You begin to see with clarity how much of your energy was being wasted on people who didn't care, on things that didn't matter, and on distractions that only delayed your growth. The world won't give you validation for working silently, but results speak in ways that noise never can. Most people are stuck in a cycle of comparison. They scroll, watch, envy, and wait. But they never act. They never isolate themselves long enough to build something. When you focus on yourself, you break out of that trap. You no longer seek permission or applause. You build, you grow, and eventually, the silence that once seemed lonely becomes your greatest advantage. Because in that silence, you begin to hear your own voice, your own vision, your own purpose. And that's what truly shocks everyone. Not what you say, but what you become. Discipline doesn't come from motivation. It comes from values. From deciding that your future self matters more than your present comfort. From realizing that nobody is coming to save you, and that the person you're waiting for is the person you must become. That shift alone can change everything. You wake up earlier, you stop negotiating with weakness, and you confront your excuses like a warrior. The transformation starts when you stop blaming others and start becoming someone others admire, not for their possessions, but for their character. Focusing on yourself doesn't mean being selfish. It means being strategic. It means filtering what you consume mentally, emotionally, and physically. It means understanding that your mind is your engine, and if you're constantly feeding it garbage, you can't expect it to produce greatness. You don't rise by accident, you rise by decision, by repetition, and by intention. Every habit you repeat either rewires you for strength or programs you for failure. That's why self-focus isn't arrogance, it's survival. Shock is not loud. It doesn't shout. It enters a room in silence and shifts the energy. Because when people see someone who used to be overlooked now standing tall, unshakable, and focused, they feel it. They don't understand how you got there. But you know. You know about the early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices, the loneliness, the setbacks, the self-doubt you overcame, and the standards you refused to lower. That's what shocks them. It's the contrast. You went silent, and came back powerful. The world won't respect what you haven't respected in yourself. You can't demand respect while ignoring your own growth. You can't expect trust from others while betraying your own goals. You don't get loyalty from people while being inconsistent with your own routines. The outside always reflects the inside. People treat you how you treat yourself. And when you level up your self-respect, everything around you elevates, your conversations, your connections, your confidence. You'll find that the more you grow, the less you speak. Why? Because real confidence isn't in words, it's in presence. In posture. In action. You walk differently when you've conquered yourself. You speak differently when you've silenced your inner critic. You choose differently when you know what you're building. And suddenly, the things you used to chase no longer matter. You're no longer looking for validation. You're now the one who gives it. That's the shift. From seeker to source. From follower to leader. From excuse to execution. The reason most people never shock the world is because they refuse to shock themselves. They don't stretch beyond what's familiar. They stay in patterns that numb them instead of break them open. But nothing meaningful happens in your comfort zone. Growth is uncomfortable. Discipline is uncomfortable. Facing your truth is uncomfortable. But that discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. It's not punishment. It's preparation. You're not being broken, you're being built. When you focus on yourself, You stop caring about timelines. You stop asking, when will it happen? And start saying, how can I prepare? You shift from impatience to readiness. You stop fearing failure and start respecting effort. Because now, you understand that everything you want requires who you're becoming. You stop obsessing over what others have. You start obsessing over what you're building. That's what self-focus does. It builds a tunnel vision so strong that noise becomes irrelevant. Even your setbacks become tools. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the rejection, all of it gets recycled into wisdom. You stop seeing them as endings and start seeing them as fuel. You're no longer the victim. You're the architect. You're designing a future where your past can't follow. Where your focus isn't diluted by opinions, distractions, or fear. Because when you get tired of being stuck, tired of watching others live the life you know you're capable of, that's when the switch flips. And when it does, nobody can unflip it. Becoming focused is not about intensity for a week. It's about consistency for years. It's not what you do when you're inspired. It's what you do when you're tired. When nobody's watching. When nothing's happening. That's where self-trust is built. In the quiet. In the repetitions. In the process. The people who shock the world aren't the ones who shouted the loudest, they're the ones who worked the longest without applause. So, focus on your sleep. Focus on your health. Focus on your circle. Focus on your input. Focus on your schedule. Focus on your habits. Focus on your mindset. Focus on your finances. Focus on your mission. The more you focus on yourself, the more you realize that most people were distractions dressed as opportunities. The more you focus on yourself, the more peace you create. And that peace is the most shocking thing of all in a world addicted to chaos. They won't see you coming. Because you chose to be invisible while you built. You disappeared into focus, and emerged as someone unrecognizable. Not because you changed for them, but because you returned to who you were always meant to be, disciplined, intentional, self-respecting, and deeply rooted in purpose. That's how you shock everyone. Not with noise, but with results. Not with attention, but with growth. And not by proving anyone wrong, but by proving yourself right.